Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dynasty Gambit, part of the Going for Two live network. We're live here every second Thursday, every two Thursdays, so we'll be coming back 2 weeks from now. But as for today, not the usual trio of co-hosts. One of my co-hosts here, Devin's here. How you doing, Devin?
Doing great. How you guys doing?
Doing fantastic, and fantastic guest joining us today. Former co-host of the Dynasty Gambit back in the version 1.0 iteration a long time ago. Gone through a few changes in co-hosts here, but glad to have you back, Dr. James Ferretti. How you doing, Doc?
I'm doing well. One of the OG members of the Dynasty Gambit back here for another go-around, but very happy to see that you guys have kept it in very good hands and good shape. And of course, I had to wear green for St. Patrick's Day, and I guess we'll get into it a little bit. As a Raiders fan, I'm wearing green for another reason, because Devonte Adams got a lot of green in his trade to the Raiders just before we started, so I'm sure we'll be talking about that.
Yeah, and I'm wearing green as a Packers fan, thinking to celebrate. Oh yeah, the Rodgers return, Devondre Campbell. Okay, they did franchise tag Devonte Adams, so reason to celebrate here. But yeah, not so much the case.
Yeah, I guess I'm in all black for the Bears funeral here with all of our signings that we've made. So.
Yeah. Well, I actually won't touch on any later. There's nothing to touch on. Sorry about that. Well, Byron Pringle. We can talk about Byron Pringle. But yeah, and if any of you, our listeners, viewers, do want to interact with us, suggest head over to the YouTube page, Going for Two Live YouTube page, Twitch as well, Facebook. See comments from all there. The video works on Twitter, but any Twitter comments we don't get to our feed and we can't see. So if you are trying to reach out to us through there, won't be able to interact, unfortunately. So again, so we're pushing so much on the YouTube page, especially at see everyone's name, see all the details we need, and get the best interactions possible. So hopefully we give you the best Dynasty interactions possible today. So I guess we'll start off. I mean, actually, one thing I did want to start off with was just reviewing some of the polls we've put out recently. And I guess we didn't really do that last episode. And Doc, maybe it'd be interesting for you to kind of maybe see or hear or see, but maybe be surprised by some of these results of these polls. Basically, a lot about the top tiers of Dynasty at different positions. All right. So we talked about running backs a few weeks ago. We talked, Jonathan Taylor, the consensus unanimous RB1, and who should be which running back should be viewed in the same tier as Jonathan Taylor. We gave 4 options: Najee Harris, Austin Eckler, Joe Mixon, DeAndre Swift. So before we read the viewers' results out, what would you think of that? Like, if you had to put one of those 4 in the same tier as Jonathan Taylor, who would you say?
Geez, I don't know if I could. I mean, he really feels like he deserves to be in a tier of his own. And I think all of the other guys that you mentioned have the potential to be really good, but they all have their warts, whether it be questionable quarterback play, age, or any combination of things going on. So I don't know if I would necessarily kind of bump one of those guys up just because. So it's like for those of you old enough to remember Brewster's Millions, the movie with Richard Pryor, I think I'm going to have to go with none of the above.
Okay, well, luckily people actually voted and didn't just leave us with zero vote results. Najee Harris, maybe not so surprisingly, won with 42%. DeAndre Swift, 36%. Austin Eckler at 17%, and then Joe Mixon down at 6%.
I had a feeling that's how it might go. It was a question of would DeAndre Swift be number 1 or number 2 for me, but yeah,
I did feel like the two that would be threatened to maybe win that poll would be Harris or Swift. Now, Dynasty wide receiver 1, we just straight out put this to people. Who is your Dynasty wide receiver 1? We put 3 options: Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, or other. I wanted to see what people thought. So what do you think, Doc?
Yeah, I think, and this hurts me a little bit because I had the opportunity to draft Jamar Chase in one of my Dynasty leagues, and I opted for Kyle Pitts, which I'm not sad about, but I think I would have to go with Jamar Chase. I mean, it's certainly close between the two of them, but I mean, what can you say about what he did? Every time one of these guys comes out, we compare them to Justin Jefferson and say, okay, well, Justin Jefferson's never going to happen again. And not only did it happen again, but Jamar Chase improved on what Justin Jefferson did, which seemed beyond impossible. And somehow he managed to do it, even in a stacked offense, even with all the other mouths to feed. And sky's the limit with him.
Yeah, and that's kind of this was maybe actually of the 4 polls we'll talk about was the most lopsided. Jamar Chase got 65% of the votes compared to only 32% by Jefferson, so doubled him up completely. I figured Chase would win, but I didn't expect that much. So people are clearly, and just because of the disparity doesn't mean people are that much higher on Chase than Jefferson. I mean, you could have them like a lot of the 65% could have them as wide receiver 1, 2, and they just happen to vote for Chase. So I think it's clearly those two. We did get one comment in particular by someone on Twitter. Twitter handle is @QuinnFloydG, and they mentioned Deebo Samuel actually as their wide receiver 1. So just I guess after everything he did last year, he finished as the wide receiver 2. I mean, he outscored both Jefferson and Chase last year, so not so crazy to think that, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, he's only 25 too, so I mean, there's definitely a case to be made there, but
I think I can't remember who, but I think I saw a GIF for someone that tweeted out a picture of saying it was AJ Brown, basically. Just no comment needed, just a picture of AJ Brown. I think it was a sunglasses GIF, and
he's a monster.
Yes, but speaking of AJ Brown's second poll was who would you add to the top tier alongside Chase and Jefferson? So AJ Brown was an option, Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp, CeeDee Lamb. So what would you say, Doc? You could answer like you did Taylor and say no, it's just clearly those two and no one else is in that tier.
Oh man, this one's tough. I actually want to add 2 to that top tier for different reasons. I want to add Cooper Kupp and I want to add AJ Brown. Cooper Kupp just because of what he did this past year, and I think we've talked about it before that everybody's screaming regression with Cooper Kupp, and even if you lop 20% off of his numbers going into next year, he's well over 100 catches, over 1,500 yards, 10 touchdowns. I mean, just a testament to what kind of an amazing season he had. And then AJ Brown, God, I love the potential there, and I think he's probably the one. If you said who's somebody that could ascend and be the number 1 wide receiver in the NFL next year, and you told me, we're having this talk this time, next year, and AJ Brown is the number 1 overall wide receiver in the NFL, that would not surprise me one bit.
And it's, Doc, you're kind of spot on with our listeners and viewers. 37% voted AJ Brown, 35% voted Cooper Kupp. So it seems like it's those two. Tyreek Hill only 16% of the votes, and then CeeDee Lamb at 13% of the votes. I was almost a little surprised that those two, I actually thought this would be pretty flat and close, not like a tier 2 and then another tier 2. So I was a little surprised there that, not as much love for Lamb, but I guess that's the way it goes. If you look at the points, that really how it should be. One comment or a couple comments from one's from Hutchinson Brown at TYFM NFL, and another comment from at FFA Meng. Both said Jalen Waddle actually deserves consideration in that top tier at wide receiver.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, unfortunately didn't give that other option for people to vote there. But and then finally, the poll from last episode: who's the Dynasty QB1? We kind of mentioned as a tier of 3: Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes. So Doc, who's your Dynasty QB1 right now?
I think it's still Patrick Mahomes for me. He hasn't done anything to lose his spot. So it's like, what do you say? In order to be the man, you got to beat the man. All those guys are great, obviously. But I think he would still be, the number 1 for me. And
actually got a comment on Twitter from Ruben Almada, someone who commissions leagues I'm in. Ruben's pretty awesome. At SuperFlexDGen on Twitter. And he says he's also going Patrick Mahomes, agreeing with you, Doc. He said because of Allen now gonna have a new offensive coordinator, and if I think it's Ken Dorsey, and if he does so well, he could potentially jump ship for a head coaching job. So maybe you lose you end up in maybe 3 years in a row with different offensive coordinators. It's maybe a bit of a stretch, but still also a risk. So it's funny how that's kind of used against him. And then another comment from Joseph Perilligo at J Pellligrio 5. NO5. Sorry. I'm bad at reading. Everybody, what he said is that he actually Josh handpicked Dorsey. And so he thinks it's a good thing that he's getting Dorsey, someone he's already worked with and can help him. So it's funny how Ken Dorsey's being used against, like, to kind of get an argument against Josh Allen to prop up Mahomes, and then the opposite. Someone else can argue the same thing for the opposite reason. So gotta love discords and discussions like that.
Yeah, well, it forms a narrative. The only thing I would caution about that is just, and we all know this, I think empirically, but reading too much into that, because, NFL offenses and teams, they're almost like a house of cards. So it's like, I always get a little trepidatious when you start kind of removing pieces, even if you're, replacing them with pieces that ostensibly look better. I mean, this was very much the narrative, which I bought into as well, with Carson Wentz going to the Colts and then being reunited with Frank Reich. And that did not go well, to say the least. So, it doesn't always work out that way. So it's good to, take that in and incorporate that as part of the data and part of the analysis, but, definitely not something you want to read too much into. They still got to go out and play the games. And there's a lot more into it than just relationships.
You're splitting hairs at the top, right? Like, decided between Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and the voting was really close. 46% said Josh Allen, 40% Mahomes, only 10% Herbert. Also got 4% for other. Not sure if that was I know someone's thinking Joe Burrow or Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray still.
All really good choices.
Devin, anything you want to talk about with any of those polls or results from that before we get to the franchise tagging?
They were pretty spot on with kind of what we were all saying the last week. I mean, AJ Brown was right up there for me to be the one to possibly jump up. He's the guy that I have no shares of, that I've been trying desperately to get shares of across my dynasty leagues and can't get. So he's right there for me too. And same with the quarterbacks. I kind of agree with all the polls. They kind of shook out the same exact way we were all discussing the previous week. So it's good to see we at least are and surrounded by some like-minded people, I guess.
It's funny. I have no shares of any of those top. I think I have my top 3 wide receivers: Chase, Jefferson, and Brown. No shares of any of them. So maybe that's something I gotta start investing into those guys.
I got Jefferson in one league, and that's it. So out of all those, I think I only have one league out of 5 dynasties that I have any of those type of top talent guys. So it's hard to get them. If you don't draft them, you got to pay for them. So.
Yeah, for sure. And pay. Well, I mean, some of the NFL teams really paid certain players the franchise tag one way to kind of at least give a bunch of guaranteed money in one go. Quickly, 3 players who were franchise tagged that aren't necessarily fantasy relevant, certainly for Dynasty. Bengals tagged safety Jesse Bates, and then a couple of offensive linemen. The Chiefs tagged Orlando Brown, and then the Jaguars put the franchise tag on Cam Robinson. I don't know if anyone has any fantasy implications of the offensive linemen, but if not, move on to the tight ends. 3 of them got tagged.
Yeah, I would say the writing was on the wall with those 3. I mean, Cam Robinson, I really didn't see getting the tag. I think he was tagged the previous year, but the Chiefs were never going to not tag when they traded away a first round pick for him, right? I'm pretty sure it was like the 31st pick last year. Something like that.
Right, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, you always felt that they were going to guarantee themselves at least 2 years with him. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Makes sense. So tag trio of tight ends tagged, and just actually get both your thoughts on who is how would you rank these 3? So we've got Mike Gesicki being tagged by the Dolphins, David Njoku having the franchise tag placed on him by the Cleveland Browns, and then the Dallas Cowboys doing the same for Dalton Schultz. So those 3, Gesicki, Njoku, and Schultz, how would you rank them dynasty-wise?
I would say Gesicki first. Probably it's real close between the next 2, but I would probably lean Schultz and then Njoku. I've been big on Njoku for a long time. He's just never done it, but now Hooper's getting out of the way. So, and Landry's gone, OBJ's gone. So he really only has Cooper, who we'll talk about in a little bit, really contend with for targets at the moment. And Schultz, he's going to benefit from Cooper leaving. So I think he actually goes a little bit higher in their pecking order, but that would be how I would rank him.
Interesting. How about you, Doc?
I think I would go Schultz first, then Gesicki, then Njoku, and I like all of them. I think Schultz is going to be even more important. And it's interesting with the Cowboys; they essentially gave up on Blake Jarwin coming back from his hip injury and released him, and then signed Michael Gallup coming off of his ACL injury and traded away Amari Cooper. So Schultz has really stepped up these past couple of years. He kind of came out of nowhere when Jarwin first got injured a couple of years ago with his ACL and really hasn't done anything but produce since he's been in there. He may even be more important this year. Gesicki, I thought it was interesting that they decided to keep him because there was a real chance that they may move on from him. But he seems to have a good connection with Tua. Tua still being in town. It's like they both kind of went through their period of, kind of unwantedness, and yet they're still there. And then Njoku, I think, Devin said it pretty well, always been impressed with the talent, and he's a physical specimen. It's just like we just haven't seen him do it yet. So I'm still hopeful that he gets the opportunity to do it. But until I see that, these other guys at least have done it. They have produced. So Njoku's got all the potential in the world. We just haven't seen him actually put it all together.
And that's why I found it interesting, Devin, that for you that the tougher debate was between 2 and 3, between Schultz and Njoku. The way I'm kind of seeing, I thought Schultz and Gesicki are much closer in value, and it'd be like Njoku, the very clear third one. So that's interesting. Maybe you're a little higher on Gesicki than consensus, or maybe a little lower than on Schultz. Maybe a combination of both.
I think, a little combo of both. And a lot of it's just projection for Njoku. The kid has all the talent in the world, man. If he just has the chance, I really feel like I've been hoping he was going to get traded for a long time because I think that it's been just a bad situation for him. So I'm just a little more optimistic that hopefully this is maybe finally his chance to show something. But he probably is. Schultz and Gesicki are probably closer than what Njoku is to him for sure.
And so I ranked them Schultz first, actually, Gesicki second, and then Njoku third. I think I'm just kind of haven't really. I need to revise the dynasty rankings a little bit, but after everything that's happened, I could see Schultz as the dynasty tight end 7. Honestly, I think after those main 6, Hawkinson, much as he has been incredibly inconsistent, not showing that enough. Outside of some flashes, some games where he does amazing. But I still think he should be the 6th guy. Some people would even have him ahead of Waller because of the age. So at least at the very worst, the 6th guy. But I think after Hawk, I think it's very wide open. Like who's 7, who's 8. Like you could list a bunch of players. Gesicki could be one of them. Goddard, Freiermuth, Alberto Quabonon. Now that we'll get about that trade in a bit. But I think I would probably stake my claim on Schultz being that guy there. I think I trust that offense to score more points probably than all those others. So invest the tight ends in the big offenses. And Thomas is here, someone a new member of the Going for Two family. First commenting here, and then a second comment talking about Owe was taken with that pick. I think we were talking about the pick that the Ravens
Kansas City got. Yep.
There you go. You know your stuff, Devin. Good. So 3 tight ends tagged, 2 wide receivers were also franchise tagged. Funny how different results for both of them. So quickly, Chris Godwin eventually reached a long-term extension with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 3 years, $60 million. Kind of a going rate for those elite wide receivers. Another receiver, maybe we'll talk about later, that got pretty much an identical contract. Tom Brady's coming back to play. So Godwin, once he returns healthy, we'll have Tom Brady throwing him the football. So, I think maybe I lowered Godwin quite a bit in my dynasty rankings just with the injury and Brady retiring. So maybe I'll bump him back up a little bit. I'm still hesitant though to go too high on him. Don't really want to invest startup in him, knowing he might miss a chunk of the season to start. So I guess Doc, you want to talk about the injury to Chris Godwin and what do we know? And am I being too worried by dropping him down to into the wide receiver 30 range?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because we saw 2 wide receivers coming off of ACL injuries late in the year get kind of big contracts. So we saw with Chris Godwin, we saw with Michael Gallup, and even myself as an injury analyst, that definitely kind of got on my radar where it was like these teams really do not seem to be that concerned about ACL injuries at all. And I think statistically we've seen players come back from ACLs, and there's a pretty kind of set timetable and guidelines, and players seem to come back and are able to produce pretty well. We've seen it with guys like Adrian Peterson and Wes Welker, in the past, just to name a few who came back and performed at a really high level for multiple years after that. But to see these guys, I was kind of similar to you. It was just like, well, maybe, I felt you feel bad for the guys because it's like this is going to hurt them. They're not going to get that big contract in their walk year. And it turns out they got them anyway. And with the teams that they originally were playing for. So time frame wise, they both got injured around the same time. So we can use, the typical timetable. Saquon Barkley, and Joe Burrow gave us a good example of this. Timeline's about 8 to 9 months from the injury post-surgery, which would put Godwin back mid to late September next year. He's probably going to go through the same thing that Saquon Barkley did, where they're going to ramp him up more slowly. I don't expect him to come back and, hit the ground running, so to speak. And there is a chance that he could end up on the PUP list if he has any kind of setback. So he's got a really tight timeline to get back in that time. I do think he's going to be productive next year. He may be slow for the first month of the season, which really gives Russell Gage a chance to kind of establish himself as the new wide receiver there. That offense can certainly feed multiple weapons, and we'll see if Gronk ends up coming back, if Leonard Fournette ends up re-signing there. But even if they do, then fine. If they don't, then I think it just gives him more, a bigger slice of the pie at the beginning of the year, and then kind of Godwin working in there.
So I guess we'll touch on Michael Gallup as well. So he signed a 5-year contract with Dallas, 5-year extension worth $57.5 million. So and he's signed a little bit longer. I think slightly younger than Godwin, maybe only by two years, I think, in age. But yeah, so dynasty value, Doc. Who would you rather invest in right now, Godwin or Gallup? Definitely not Galladay.
Yeah, I would probably. I mean, it's really close, so I don't think there's a wrong answer here. I would probably opt for Gallup just because the longer contract, you get a couple of years younger and more consistency as far as the offense is concerned. Because Tom Brady came back, this year, but how much longer is he going to play for? Is it going to be another year? Is it going to be another 2 years? Is he really going to play till he's 50? I don't know. You can never rule anything out with him, but at least I'm pretty confident Dak Prescott's going to be the quarterback there, and that offense is still going to be pretty good for the foreseeable future, and he could be a really big part of that. So I'd want to have a piece of that for sure.
I mean, frankly, Tom Brady could come back and play for a different team too. Like, I believe this is the last year of his contract with Tampa, so he could choose to just walk as a free agent. I don't think Tampa's going to trade him, so he could just walk as a free agent. And even if he plays, it might not be throwing him the football. So like you're saying, by the end of that contract, Godwin may not have Tom Brady as his quarterback.
Stranger things have happened, right?
Yeah.
So if I was to tell you guys that Michael Gallup is actually 6 days younger than Godwin, would that change your opinion at all?
It wouldn't for me, but it's actually kind of impressive that we were thinking that Gallup was so much younger.
Yeah. He's only a couple days, and probably not less than a week actually younger than him. I just looked it up because I knew I'd looked the other day and saw what his age was.
Right.
But I think he kind of
making me look not so smart about the ages. But it's strange because I'm Godwin. This is already his he's gotten through a tag year and whereas Gallup's fresh off the rookie contract, so I guess maybe only a year more in the NFL.
Think Godwin came out a little older. You know what I mean? And then also regarding these two, I kind of think Gallup shot himself in the foot a little bit. I mean, he got a good deal for coming off an injury, but compared to some of the numbers that these other guys are getting, man, I mean, he's got the lowest deal, I think, at least as far as some of the bigger names that have signed by quite a bit. I think this is only average like 12 or 13 million, something like that. And most of them are at least over 15 right now. So I think he might have shot himself in the foot a little bit and maybe seen what he could have got on the open market had he tested it.
But I also wonder how much, because he signed 5 years where a lot of these other receivers signed for 3. So for him, it seems like the stability seemed like that kind of played an importance. So he was maybe willing to take less average for a longer term and more total money to the contract. And
yeah, especially with him being a former third-round pick, I'm sure he probably was looking to cash in for as long as he could.
Yeah, that's true. And I think maybe, knowing you're on the injury, like, okay, this next season might not be great for production. If you're only signing 3 years, you only get maybe 2 years of that peak production, as opposed to now, like, he can put 3-4 solid years of tape as long as he doesn't get hurt, and then maybe cash it after year 5 in another big contract. I think he's got more leeway, doesn't have to put pressure on himself to come back too early and maybe aggravate something and risk something. So I wonder if that kind of also factored in.
Yeah, definitely. Makes sense. I just seeing all these numbers, some of the guys we're going to be getting into, seeing what their contract details are, is a lot more than what I thought they were going to get. So we'll discuss that when we get there, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think, the money for Dallas, right? They've paid Dak Prescott. They've paid Ezekiel Elliott, and the tag on Schultz. They've paid some of their other defensive players. So they've definitely have had some money thrown around there for sure. And one player they had to kind of part ways with in an effort to save money, though, was Amari Cooper. So we'll start with that trade there. Going to the Cleveland Browns, the return is basically, I think the team swapped 6th-round picks, and Dallas got an extra 5th-rounder this year. So almost, very inconsequential in terms of the actual return. Does seem like it's Cleveland's eating the entire contract, so Dallas could have the money to kind of finance tagging Schultz and re-signing Gallup.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I wonder if you guys heard that apparently there's a rumor, I don't know if it's true, but that Dak Prescott and Amari Cooper kind of got into it after that playoff loss. And
I did see that.
Amari Cooper made a comparison to Dak Prescott that I guess Dak Prescott didn't appreciate too much, and they got into it a little bit. So I wonder how much maybe that had to do with it as well. I don't know, but it just seemed like they wanted to move on. Maybe even both sides wanted to move on.
Yeah, I did wonder the way they structured that contract. Very front loaded the first 2 years. Dallas maybe knew, we might be signing him to this extension. Really, even if it's a 4-year extension, we may only have him for 2 years, and we're willing to kind of get out of it. And they're at least able to get a 5th out of it when it seemed like they were ready to just release him and save the money.
Yeah, it was coming down to the wire because, every report that I had seen was like, okay, there's been no takers. They're probably going to release him. And then the Browns kind of swept in at the 11th hour to get him. But
so the classic Dynasty kind of, philosophy, essentially, what do you prefer? Him being part of the Cowboys offense, more mouths to feed. You've got CeeDee Lamb. You had Michael Gallup and Schultz. I think we were surprised by how many targets he was getting, but consistently every week, like you were saying, Doc, there was very rarely where he wasn't catching 3-4 passes every week. So clearly part of that offense. So is it better to be in that incredibly efficient offense with more mouths, or he goes to the Browns as very clearly the alpha? He's going to get the probably a bigger target share percentage wise, but in a less efficient offense, do we like that more? So I guess basically the question is, does this move to Cleveland raise his dynasty value from where it was, or does it drop?
For me personally, I don't think it really changed all that much, but I do think from the outside looking in, I think most people are going to give you less today than what they would have when he was still attached to the Cowboys. So, realistically, he has a worse quarterback now. It's kind of up in the air what they're even going to do with their quarterback position there. So there's a lot of questions there. But overall, he's going to get more targets, like you said. He clearly is pretty much the only receiver. I think Donovan Peoples-Jones and then Njoku, the only other two there, and they don't really scare you much. So I think he's going to be just as equally as productive. He's going to be catching at least 4 or 5 passes probably every game. But I think the impact does hurt him that he went to the Browns.
Yeah, I would agree with what Devin said, and I'll just be brief. I've always been kind of more of like the idea of like a rising tide lifts all boats. So if given the choice between any of those two type players, a player going to a worse team and becoming the alpha versus being on a more efficient offense, I'll take my chances with the guy on the better offense and just know that all the players are going to be improved and have a chance on a week-to-week basis to have some really good weeks. And a lot of those guys can just be plug and play guys and you forget about it. And there's always that risk if you're the only focal point of the offense, unless you're Cooper Kupp in the second half of the Super Bowl when pretty much everybody in the free world knew he was getting the ball and the Bengals still couldn't stop him. That can definitely hurt your production. So I would have preferred, if I was in Amari Cooper, like if I had shares of Amari Cooper, that he was staying in Dallas as opposed to moving on.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, Dan's here.
What up, B-League?
Yeah, I guess
you want to be a Giants fan. It's just nothing like rubbing a little salt in the wound, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, Dan. There we go. Sorry, trying to get it up. There we go. Yes. Yeah, he wants me to be a Giants fan. But we still have Aaron Rodgers, I think, for now anyway. Still have Devonte Campbell too, so I guess I can't be. I'll stick with the Packers here, Dan, especially on St. Patrick's Day where he should be wearing green. Yeah, too soon. I mean, again, you're a Giants fan. What can I even say? Like, to be fair, though, the Giants have won a Super Bowl more recently than the Packers and beat the Packers en route to that Super Bowl. So what can I even really say? But yes, I think it's almost like Dan's on the show right now, Doc, right? Because we're going to get to Devonte Adams just now and to the victor go the spoilers. So tagged by the Packers. He was the last player we're going to talk about with the franchise tag. And unlike Godwin, well, it looks like he will get a long-term extension from a new team, though, as the Packers, just before we got on air, traded Devonte Adams for a first and a second round pick this year, the 22nd overall and the 53rd overall pick. I remember the last time we played the Packers in a playoff. Randall Cobb caught a Hail Mary at the end of the half, and then they just stomped them in the second half. I remember that too. Odell Beckham got all mad and punched the wall at Lambeau. that was fun. Not so fun now that Devonte Adams is going to the Raiders. So, Doc, as a Raiders fan, I mean, how could you not be ecstatic for this?
Yeah, I mean, this was obviously the best case scenario for, the narrative over the last couple of days. I've been listening to so many podcasts, and they're like, what are the Raiders doing? Why aren't they making any moves? And then, things started to trickle in. They get Chandler Jones to add to that, Max Crosby with that amazing, they're formulating an amazing pass rush. And it's just like, okay, but why are they freeing up this money? What are they going to do? And then bam, here it is. Now they get Devonte Adams reunited with his college teammate in Derek Carr, and Devonte Adams gets his money after he said he was not playing under the franchise tag under any circumstances whatsoever. And he's the $141 million man over the next 5 years. And I think it would be hard to argue that that's going to be anything other than money well spent. So it's really exciting. I have to be honest, though, is like anytime a player moves on from where he has such a good fit to a new team, even as a Raiders fan, I'm ecstatic for the opportunity, but still have to be kind of cautious as far as, I think he takes a hit here, as far as his production. I mean, he could still be amazing, but do you guys still have him as like a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL? I don't know if I do.
I think I actually have him a little lower now. I think he's still a wide receiver 1, but I think he's kind of towards the bottom of that wide receiver 1 tier, maybe like wide receiver 8, 9, somewhere in there. Yeah. Not a huge hit, but I mean, there's more mouths to feed. He's got to contend with Waller. Renfro is a great PPR guy. And then then he takes a hit at the quarterback position as well. So all 3 of those things kind of factored in. I think you have to lower him a little bit, but he's still going to be a wide receiver 1, but I don't think he's number 1 overall or anywhere like that.
Yeah, I think redraft, I'd probably still be willing to take him in the top 5. But first,
I would agree with that.
We've already talked about it, like Chase and Jefferson, AJ Brown. I still have Tyreek Hill up there. Cooper Kupp, I think, is kind of as much as they're close to about the same age. What Cooper Kupp did last year, and again, he gets to keep his same quarterback. Kind of have to feel like he gets the edge there. Same with Stephon Diggs, slightly younger, hasn't quite put up the seasons that Kupp or Adams have done. Diggs has never been the wide receiver 1 overall, but getting to play alongside Josh Allen. So, I think at the very highest dynasty wise, I could say, I guess that would be wide receiver 7 right after those guys. That's kind of like the absolute ceiling. And then I think that next two, you get into the younger guys, T. Higgins, DK Metcalf, CeeDee Lamb. Like, do you want to go Adams or them? And I think in a startup, that's a really tough decision to make. If, talking trades, you've probably, the move is probably so expensive that if you have any of those guys, you're probably not wanting to pivot down to Adams too much. And I suppose the Adams manager probably isn't willing to give the picks to kind of say, okay, Adams in an early second to get to T. Higgins. Does that the person who have Adams really want to add to get to a guy that might? So it's one of those where it's tough to make those trades in that range. So really, it does come down to when you're in a startup and you're sitting at that, again, wide receiver 7 to 10 range. Are you going with the young guy? Or are you going with Adams? And it's a tough decision each time, and each manager kind of has to make that decision for themselves whenever they're on the clock.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting to think about like the life of this deal, and it could be something where you could see Devonte Adams kind of take a little dip next year, and then have an upward trajectory after that. No, there is something to be said for acclimating to a new environment. Just the intangibles for when a player moves, even if they move to a better offense or a better situation on the field. As somebody who's moved many times throughout my career for school and for jobs and things like that. Moving sucks. And even if you pay other people to do it, it still sucks. It disrupts your life. You have all these things or opportunity costs. You have to find a place to live. You have to get acclimated to a new situation. You have to get acclimated to new personnel. If you start a new job, where is the cafeteria? Where is the bathroom? Where is the wide receiver room? How do I get there? How do I get around town? All those things take time and energy, and that's less time and energy that it disrupts your routine and it keeps you from studying the playbook and all the other things that you need to do in order to be successful. It just takes time. So sometimes that happens with these guys and we see a little dip, and then once they get acclimated, they shoot right back up. So, if you were thinking about maybe not being competitive next year, but the year after that, then, Devonte Adams could be right back in the top 5 again. In year 2 and beyond. So just something else to work into the equation.
Well, talk about a culture shock, right? Going from Green Bay, Wisconsin to Las Vegas. Can't get much different on those two,
Absolutely right.
Man, to have that kind of contract in Las Vegas, man, woof.
But I do think the one thing that might remain the same, though, is the volume. I'm not as concerned that he loses has a lesser target share than what he was in Green Bay. I think the Raiders making this trade is saying you're the alpha. It's not Darren Waller. We're going to find a way to get Devonte Adams 130, 140 receptions next season. And then Waller kind of falls behind. So maybe, my initial talk earlier about the tight ends, maybe it's not so clear, a top 5 that ends with Waller and then Hawkinson is the 6th. And again, I know some people who do already have Hawkinson ahead of Waller anyway, but yeah, maybe that maybe it is a very clear top 4, and then Hawkinson, Waller kind of in that next tier where both might not be the alpha on their team, but could still see a ton of volume anyway.
And Doc, you probably have better details on this, but how much longer is Derek Carr's contract for the Raiders? Because it's pretty close to coming up, if I remember correctly. Is that correct?
It is. I don't know if I think this might be his last year. Kyle is usually the expert on those things. But I know it's a question. It's coming up soon.
I'm pulling up Spotrac, and 2022 is the final year of his contract.
There you go.
So that'll be a little interesting. I mean, I would imagine they probably stick with him, but I guess it's probably almost a tryout year for him with a new coaching staff and everything like that. I wouldn't think they'd move on from him, but either way, they're going to have to pay him as well to keep that together.
And I mean, you almost have to get that done before the season or risk losing him next year, right?
Right.
If he does so well, you're paying more. So
first or second round one
that Josh McDaniels and that Raiders staff may have to make the decision before the season starts. Of course, maybe they decide to move on from him, and that's he's auditioning not just for the Raiders but for every other team as well.
If I had to hazard a guess, I would say that was a big portion of both Josh McDaniels and Devonte Adams coming to Las Vegas, and that probably was worked out, at least kind of handshake agreement wise, before anybody committed to anything. I could be wrong. I mean, $141 million is a lot of, a lot of money. So I don't know if that's enough to dissuade somebody from, moving on to quarterback. It might be.
Yeah, especially if he's moving from Aaron Rodgers to Derek Carr. I don't think he's going to mind the downgrade from Carr to whoever another.
No, but they have
right?
a history together, and that I think was kind of a big draw as far as him going to Las Vegas, aside from the Brinks truck worth of money that they backed up to his front door.
Maybe there's that's kind of insight to they know that they're working on an extension with Carr.
Yeah,
that is being done. Their priorities right now are trying to get, like you say, get this trade with Adams done. Clearly, that was maybe a big priority, and like you say, sign Chandler Jones and there's other free agents. So once that kind of goes, maybe that's when the Derek Carr extension talks really go into high gear.
And he doesn't want to go anywhere either. I mean, he's even said, I don't know if he would follow through on it, but I mean, he seems to be a guy of pretty high integrity. He says, I don't want to play for anybody other than the Raiders, and if I'm not with the Raiders, I want to retire.
And now that you're gonna have the best receiver ever in Adams, this is the last time you want to leave now. This is the perfect time to stay.
Yeah, but he's been pretty consistent with that his whole, for the last few years. He doesn't want to play anywhere else. He loves the Raiders, and he seems like he's a guy of high integrity. So if he says that, I kind of am inclined to believe him.
So not the quarterback moving teams, but there's some other quarterbacks that did move teams. So not Aaron Rodgers. But in fact, it was Russell Wilson that was traded to the Denver Broncos, and Seattle received 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and a 5th. Basically a swap of a 5th and the 4th. So 2 firsts and 2 seconds, if you really think about it that way, including the 9th overall pick this year, which replaces the Seahawks' 10th overall pick that they don't have because of the Jamal Adams trade. But so on top of 2 firsts and 2 seconds, they got defensive lineman Shelby Harris, tight end Noah Fant, and quarterback Drew Lock. So, tons to talk about here. We can start either side, Denver side or Seattle side, of how this goes for these players. It's funny. Thinking about it, we talked last week, Devin, you'll remember this, just talked about the quarterback tiers and how even Brian, who was kind of down on Lamar Jackson, still said it's a clear 7. Like for him after Jackson, for myself, it's after Dak Prescott, it drops, and it's kind of a big tier before it gets to QB 8. Does that change now? Wilson with these weapons now, and maybe a better offense with potentially more pass attempts, more volume. Is that enough to move Wilson into that tier? Maybe he's still the clear QB 8, but is the tier break after QB 8 instead of after QB 7, or is it the tier break still before Wilson, and just he's kind of now at the top of that tier very easily? Like, how do you view it, Devin?
For me, I think he's still right there at 8. I don't think I would bump him up into the next one. I think the weapons, honestly, are pretty comparable. You're going from DK to Sutton, and you're going from Lockett over to Judy. So, and he never really has been that big of a tight end thrower. So, I mean, I think Alberto is due for a good year now with him there. But I think, pretty minimally, I don't think I think he actually took a little bit of a step back with the receivers, but he has a better team overall around him. So for me, I wouldn't move him, but I think it was a slam dunk trade for the Broncos. I mean, you don't get franchise quarterbacks like that he's still got probably 10 years left in the tank if he does anything, at least to his 40s. So that's probably 7 or 8 years at least. So, I mean, to just trade that away, especially in not a very good quarterback draft class, to trade away the 9 pick, I think was just a home run for them. I think they won that trade by a landslide.
Yeah, I know. I saw Thomas comment about this earlier on the Go Jacket pod. So apparently, Russell Wilson said at a press conference, "God gave me a right hand to throw deep to Sutton and Patrick and whoever else." So apparently, Judy is considered whoever else. So if we needed the confirmation that who's the receiver to buy, because I think that was going to be a big question. Like who, I think that the biggest bump from all this trade is probably Alberto Quaidom, just because he goes from being the backup tight end to the starter. So his bump is going to be massive, but I still don't think he's going to outproduce the receivers. But yeah, Sutton or Judy, who do you want to invest in? After hearing this comment, kind of agree with Thomas a little bit into the RIP Judy's value. But what are you guys thinking?
Take them all. Take whoever you can get.
Well, and that attitude, Doc, almost makes me wonder, like, you just want the cheaper guy. If this offense is going to be, like, you don't mind taking the later shots at Tim Patrick or Alberto Quabonon more than reaching for Judy or Sutton.
Even Hamler.
Ah, nice, yeah. And yeah, Tom was saying at value, Patrick is the guy. That's kind of my thinking too, is going to be, I don't like the tight ends, but this was maybe the one time where I might want to invest in the tight end here more than the receivers, just thinking he will be cheaper just because from how far down he's coming. And no one seems to know how to pronounce Albert Okwuegbunam very well. So maybe that also hurts his value a little. But Devin, what are you thinking?
I agree with that. I like the Patrick get. I think that's a really good person to target. Alberto is another good one. I think Alberto is going to be a little bit harder now because I think most people who had him are trying to sell at max value. So I don't think they're going to really take too mediocre of a deal for him, especially that he's 23 years old. But yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be electric there. I think Sutton is probably the guy to get. He's mostly a deep threat guy, but I think it's going to unlock Judy a little bit. I think people are a little too low on him. I mean, when he came out of college, his route running was what set him apart from everyone. Everyone was saying he's one of the best route runners that's ever come into the NFL. And now you have a quarterback who's as accurate as Wilson. I think it's really going to unlock his potential. He's never had anyone like that. Doug Baldwin, DK Metcalf, Lockett. I don't think they were very much great route runners. They were good, but I don't think they're to Judy's level of route running.
Yeah, I was gonna say Baldwin's probably the closest. Can play in the slot,
agreed.
Can get open. So that was probably where Baldwin was fantastic with Wilson. So Lockett maybe possesses a bit more speed and downfield ability than Judy, but same thing for kind of playing from the slot. So I think the slot receiver is a good guy to have in a Russell Wilson offense too. So I think it's all going to depend on price. I'd imagine Judy's probably going to go higher than Sutton in most startups, and like kind of still viewed as a little higher in dynasty value. So to your credit, Devin, that probably makes Sutton more the buy than Judy, who's going to be his price is already a little pricey just because he's still young, still in the rookie contract. Maybe a little too expensive. It might actually mean this might be a sell for Jerry Judy. Like this could be like the highest sell value he's ever had with this great a quarterback. So might almost mean this to sell because we'll see though.
Yeah,
maybe he comes out and smashes and he has 1,200 yards and then that's not so smart to sell.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. Me when on the Dynasty Gambit, it was always like, Doc, you buy or sell this guy. I'm like, how about a hold? How about you just see what happens? It's like these, kind of minor things move the needle. I think I have Cortland Sutton, I have Jerry Judy. I'm holding them both, and I have Tim Patrick. I'm holding them all. And
if you held them through Drew Lock, Teddy Bridgewater time, now that you've got Wilson, you want to see a season.
Now it's like I just hit the jackpot. So it's like maybe it's time to see all that play out. So these things aren't always binary. It's like we're deciding between Judy and Sutton. It's like they could both be very good, and it's like, do I buy or do I sell? How about you do neither? How about you just hold and enjoy?
The doctor is putting you on hold. So one more trade to get to. Actually, I guess what we didn't talk about was the Seattle side of all this. So, I guess we're talking about, like, we already referenced with Adams, right? And still in the top 10, still top 12. Same thing for Metcalf, even though the downgrade in quarterback. Is he still viewed still think he should be in the top 12 dynasty wide receivers?
Man, his value to me took a pretty big hit. I'd like to see kind of how some things shake out. I mean, I think he's still 24 years old. This is going to be his last year, I think, under contract. They'll probably franchise him, try to work out a long-term deal. But they truly are, I think, with this trade, close to being a quarterback away, at least on offense, from being pretty competitive. So, I mean, you still have Lockett there. You have DK. Now you have Fan in the middle. If you put even just a mediocre quarterback, like maybe like a Jimmy Garoppolo or someone there, that's a pretty potent offense. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I don't think Locke is their long-term answer. And even this year, it's kind of hard to believe with so many quarterbacks potentially available that they're just going to roll with Locke. I have a hard time believing that. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. But I think his value did take a little bit of a hit for me. I had him pretty high. I've always been a pretty big DK guy. So he was closer to the top 5, top 6 for me, to where now I think he's definitely probably lower top 10 for me.
I guess, yeah, Metcalf, T. Higgins, CeeDee Lamb. They're all pretty young. Is he below those guys, but below Lamb, below Higgins, just for the offense and the quarterbacks?
I think so now. Yeah, I think so. I think Higgins, he's tied to Joe Burrow at least for the foreseeable future. And with all the questions at quarterback with Seattle, I think that's a fair assessment. Yeah.
Yep, totally agree. I think he's a little bit lower right now, but I totally agree with what Devin said. I don't think they're done. So, this situation could change a lot in the coming weeks and months.
Which probably makes him actually a pretty good buy low right now, because if we think they're going to make a move at quarterback, probably get him at a little bit of a discount right now. I don't know if it's going to be a great discount, but it'll at least be a little bit better than what you would have about 3 weeks ago.
I mean, I know there were games he kind of made it work with Geno Smith. I think Lockett's taking the much bigger hit. It seems like a lot of his success was tied to his connection with Wilson, whereas Metcalf, I mean, he's kind of developed that connection with Wilson, but it's the athletic freak, right? Like, you could kind of see his success translating to different quarterbacks, whereas with Lockett, it's going to take, his rookie, his first like 2-3 years, he wasn't spectacular, like 300, 400 receiving yards, kind of more special teams guy. And then as, year 4, year 5, he's grown that connection with Wilson's grown. That's when he really started to take off and hit 1,000 yards. So I think it would take time, maybe not as long, but time, even if another good quarterback comes in to gain that connection. So yeah, I definitely think Lockett is the, suffers the bigger hit. Fant's value, he goes from, it's the same thing as with Amari Cooper almost. He went from the more crowded area to where the quarterback play was not great, but decent. But now if he really does have Drew Lock and Sam Ellinger as like, those are your 2 quarterbacks, probably better off with Teddy Bridgewater. So again, maybe it's not too much of a hit for Fant because he's kind of had the struggling quarterback play anyway.
Well, and then Seattle re-signed Disley too to a 2-year deal. I thought that was kind of curious after they trade for Fant. I thought the writing was on the wall that he was probably going to be a free agent and walk out of town, but they brought him back, which I know he's kind of had a very up and down career. He's had injuries and he's been very involved and not involved at all. So really, I don't know how that impacts him, but it didn't strike me as curious that they even brought him back.
Yeah, that's true too. But Seattle does like to kind of run, the tandem at tight end. Like they'll go 2, 3, 4 at a time in a game, and only like 4 tight ends active and kind of rotate through them. So I wasn't totally shocked. I figured that they would sign a notable enough backup that they can kind of rotate with Fant. Fant's not a great blocker either, so maybe you get Disley more as the blocking tight end. Still think Fant is the better guy to have value wise, but I think Disley signing doesn't hurt him as much as the lack of quarterback hurts him.
Yeah, for right now. I guess I wonder with Fant, like his talent has always been there. I mean, the guy's a physical freak. People have been kind of waiting for him to ascend for years. I wonder if this is the thing that kind of perception-wise, I'm right there with you. I wonder if this is the thing perception-wise that kind of pushes him into the tight end 2 grouping. And then he's one of those guys where he really is a buy low just because of all the questions, on offense. And then all of a sudden they get a quarterback and things are looking up, and he's got the potential to jump right back into the top 10, maybe even an outside shot at top 5, in the right situation. And he really turns out to be, quite a value. Because I think that, what do they say? You buy when the blood is running in the streets, right? I mean, it's getting pretty bloody in the Noah Fant camp. So is his value ever been lower? I don't know. I don't think it
probably
has.
Not. No, I think he's probably been, since he came out, probably viewed as a top 10 tight end. And now it's probably, is he even in the top 15? And that's probably the conversation a lot of people are having. So to your credit, like that's yeah. I wonder who dropped more, Fant or Lockett. I still think Lockett's value probably just tanked completely.
Yeah, because Fant still always has age on his side. You never know if he's going to change, situations anytime in the future.
Lockett's 28, 29?
I think he's going to be 30 if I remember correctly. So he's right there.
Receivers at that age in Dynasty.
Yeah. With Fant, I've actually bought him now in 2 other dynasties. So I'm in 5 total. I had him in 2 already, and then I just bought him pretty low in the 2 that I got now. So I'm trying to be like Thanos and collect him in every single league that I'm in here, just because I still believe in the guy, man. It's just he's another Njoku guy is what it's looking like right now, where you just hope that the situation improves, and it hasn't yet. But all the talent's there, So
for sure.
I guess we'll see. But he's definitely a buy low.
Well, just we're talking quarterback trades, and Devin, you and I were going to share some of our dynasty trades at the end of the episode. But do you want to share this one now? Like, what were you able to buy Fant for, if you remember?
Oh, so for Fant, I got him for this year in a 12-team Superflex league for the 205. So, I was looking at who's going to projectedly kind of still be there. Most of the talent kind of dries up right around the very early picks of the second round. Even in Superflex, I'm not exactly sure where these quarterbacks are going to go. Yeah. But at the 204, right in there, it's just, I think that's kind of the drop off. So I was more than happy to throw one of those out there, and see what happens.
Well, let's say, Trey McBride looks like he'll probably be the first tight end in rookie dynasty drafts anyway. I mean, if he's like 205, probably doesn't seem like that. Maybe even me is a bit of an early at his range, but you're essentially saying you'd rather have Noah Fant, the guy that's already been in the NFL, than any of the rookies coming in.
I would, for me personally. Yeah, he's got a first-round pedigree compared to all these other guys aren't. And I know the situation's bad, but for who you're likely going to get in that range, I think it's totally worth it.
Just on that philosophy alone, betting against rookie tight ends, I like it.
That's usually the case. Last year we were kind of spoiled with Pitts or whatever, but
Freiermuth.
Yeah, Freiermuth had a really good year too. So yeah, usually
it's funny. Freiermuth did basically what we've been waiting Noah Fant to do since he came out almost. So
yeah, now he's got Mitch Trubisky throwing to him.
Yeah, which I guess that leads off the next quarterback change. But so just to continue, one last trade that happened in the NFL. Washington traded for Carson Wentz, and on top of swapping seconds, which basically moved up 5 picks, Indy essentially got 2 third-round picks. One could become a second. I think if it's kind of the same deal with the Eagles, where if Wentz plays 70% of the snaps this upcoming season, it escalates to a second. I think with the Eagles, it was a first. So the Colts basically spent a first on a 1-year rental for Wentz and have kind of got the rest of their money back in a sense. But Washington gets Carson Wentz now. Back to the NFC East.
I think it's a pretty good move for them, honestly. I mean, knowing that they probably weren't going to be in the bigger name quarterback races of trades. I mean, it's pretty minimal risk, really, when you think about what he's gone for. And he's probably one of the best quarterbacks they've had there. I don't think it's really a huge upgrade over Heineke, if I'm being very truthful about everything. I think he's a really good deep ball thrower, so I think it's going to be pretty good for Terry McLaurin. Definitely probably the best quarterback McLaurin's played with. But I thought it was a pretty easy risk for the Washington right now. I didn't see a problem with it. I think a lot of people just overly hate Carson Wentz. I know he's not the best out there. He's pretty reckless with the ball, but I feel like he gets a little more hate than what he probably deserves. I think he's a more than capable quarterback. He's just not that great.
I mean, even the interceptions, right? It's the timing of it, like throwing it at the worst time. But I think he was 4th in the NFL in touchdown interception ratio last year. I think Rodgers just outstanding. Russell Wilson didn't throw a lot of picks. Dak Prescott was up there, but I think Wentz was ahead of Brady in touchdown interception ratio. So,
and he only played in 12 games last year. And statistically, if that was a Bears quarterback, would have been the best quarterback year a quarterback's ever had for the Bears. So, I look at it from that window. If I'm a Bears fan, I've never had anything good. So people always kind of crapping on the guy. I'm like, he's probably would be the franchise. We would have a statue of him if it was us. So.
Be right next to Jim McMahon on Mount Rushmore of Bears quarterbacks.
Exactly, after one season.
And I think with Washington, I agree with you, Devin. I get why they did it from their perspective and the timing of it. They didn't have to give up Chase Young. They didn't have to give up the 11th overall pick or a future first. They didn't have to give up any of these prime assets. And they must feel this is an upgraded quarterback, or else they wouldn't be making the trade. They just stick with Heineke or they draft somebody at 11 and hope for that. So they must be thinking it's an upgrade, which, the quarterback play they've had over the last 2 years, I think Heineke was by far the best quarterback play they got. He wasn't particularly that great. So I think even if Wentz is not fantastic, he'll still probably be better than what they've had. So from Washington perspective, I get that. It's probably the best they could have acquired. They weren't going to, Russell Wilson wasn't going to agree to get traded to there. Same with
Right.
Aaron Rodgers, right? And same with Deshaun Watson. Are you really trusting this rookie class? Maybe at 11 they get their pick or maybe the second quarterback off the board, but is that really the franchise answer? So I'm not so sure from Indy's perspective. He good enough. It does seem like maybe more off the field than on the field. I wonder. On the field wasn't great. They didn't get to the playoffs, so you downgraded because Rivers got you to the playoffs, but luck didn't. So, or not luck. Luck did, but Wentz didn't. Wrong big body guy. But yeah,
I think that loss to Jacksonville really poisoned the well there. I actually like this. I like this for both sides because Indy gets out from under that. There was no way he was going to be able to continue as the quarterback. The fan base would have stormed the gates if he was still under center there next year. And, as far as like, this is another thing with narratives. Let me take you guys on a journey. So let's go back to this time last year. And remember how excited everybody was that Fitzpatrick was going to be the quarterback there and what he was going to do for that offense. Is Carson Wentz really that much different than Ryan Fitzpatrick? And yet the narrative is that Wentz sucks and Fitzpatrick is a great fit for that offense. I don't really see it as being that different. I'm still excited for all the other weapons there because I think he is an improvement over Heineke, even though I think Heineke is a good quarterback. Why can't Wentz do this year what we thought Fitzpatrick was going to do for them last year?
And I mean, like in terms of like for McLaurin, I think it's good in that what we've seen in Wentz's career is he'll hyper target whoever the alpha is. Like whoever his top 1 and 2 targets are, he'll give a ton towards them. So I think good for McLaurin. He should see maybe a better health target share than what he did last year with Heineke, who didn't always, McLaurin's in double teamed, I'll look somewhere else. Wentz for if you trust your guy, you might go to him a little more in those situations. Did it with Alshon Jeffrey a ton, always throwing a ton of targets to Zach Ertz. So not awful for Logan Thomas either, I don't think. If they don't really address the tight end position, he should come in there and be the starting tight end and be
not bad for Curtis Samuel. Not bad for the running backs. Might even be good for Diami Brown. Who? That guy who is.
I was going to say it might be good for whatever rookie wide receiver they draft this year to come in and be like the number 2 receiver on the team.
But yeah, he evaporated last year, and he's a super talented guy. He can contribute next year as well. I don't know. There's just something I feel like the Washington offense is very much under the radar, and they could be really good.
We already know from last year, Doc values Antonio Gibson as a top 5 running back. I'm on that train too, so I think Gibson should do great, regardless of what.
Oh, sorry. I was ready for takeoff, man, with Gibson when McKissick was linked to the Bills, and then he went back on his word and rejoined Washington.
I still think there's room. There's enough pieces of the pie to go around. I think they're.
I do. I do too. I've been a big Gibson guy too ever since he's come in. I have him in multiple leagues, and man, I was ready for liftoff on that whole thing, and we got about 24 hours in and came crashing back down to earth. So
yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I think so. I think there, in terms of free agents, I guess there is so much to kind of address. We're already at the hour mark, so I guess one thing we can talk about is quarterbacks, and I guess really the only quarterback that changed teams that is of consequence is Mitch Trubisky. This is the Steelers starter, not like huge starter money though. Not even 14.5 million over 2 years. So less than 10 million per year. So it's really not starter money. This almost screams more competition, but Trubisky competing against Haskins and Rudolph should win that competition. I think as much as he's struggled, I think he's shown enough to show he's clearly better than those two. So imagine I would be shocked if he's not the week 1 starter. And like, it's not like, I think it'll be, even if the contract doesn't say it, if he goes out in training camp and shows he's the guy, he's probably going to have a long leash starter wise. They've got a 2-year investment on him, so they really are going to try and get the most. I think maybe in 2023, if he's really struggling, they could maybe start to try someone else. But I really get the sense he's going to have, again, assuming he proves it in training camp and shows that he's the best, I think he's going to have a long leash to make some mistakes and not lose his starting job.
I don't really think them signing him precludes them from drafting someone still in the first round. I think it's still very much on the table. The Haskins contract and Rudolph too are pretty minimal. I don't think it really cost them much of anything to actually get out of those. So I kind of viewed it more as they got their bridge quarterback, and then depending on how the draft is going to shake out, I think there's a couple guys who could fall to them where they're picking. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them bring in a first round pick.
I think Devin nailed it.
Oh, that's fair. Okay, so we're not elevating Trubisky's dynasty value much.
Maybe if you have him this year in a super flex, I mean, you can see how it shakes out if you want, but you might be able to try to get as much as you can for him now before the draft does happen, or the writing's on the wall, because he's got a lot of allure around him right now. He's away from Matt Nagy. He spent a year with Josh Allen. Did he learn much with them? When he came in relief, he looked pretty good with the Bills offense. So, you might be able to sell him a little higher than what you might be able to even a month from now.
So again, crazy trades, right? And I guess that leads us to, talking dynasty trades. So Devin, you've already shared one of your trades. Is there anything else you kind of wanted to talk about? Recent trades you've made?
I'll put this one out there because I think I did pretty good, but it's gotten some mixed reviews. So I'll see maybe what Doc thinks here. So I traded Joe Mixon for 10. It's just a 10 team, not non-super flex, right? It's PPR. Traded Joe Mixon for Josh Jacobs and Rashad Bateman. And
love it.
So I'm a huge Bateman guy.
I knew Doc would love it, but I also know he's pretty high on Jacobs, so he wouldn't see it as much of an RB down.
No, continue, please. But I'll be happy to elaborate on why I love it. But I loved it before when you said I traded Joe Mixon. I already was like, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna like this. But please continue.
So that was my line of thinking. Was he's coming off a year where he's going to be 26 this year. He's coming off a year where he had 16 touchdowns, which for any position, I don't care if it's wide receiver, running back, whatever, it's hard to duplicate that again. I think they're transitioning more into a pass-first offense. They kind of were doing that towards the end of the year. They weren't even using Mixon on third down a lot, which was kind of confusing. But I was really big on Bateman when he came out of college. His metrics tested out of the roof. So I really liked him. So I thought it was worth it. Jacobs is a year younger, 2 years younger, something like that. So I kind of extended my running back window right now. And the wide receivers I was working with on my team was McLaurin, and my second best was Chase. So I really needed to bring someone into the fold that maybe could pop off this year and ascend to a higher level. So,
yeah, I really like it for you. And I give you a lot of credit because taking a guy like Joe Mixon, who he's very polarizing. And the thing is, like, you did the really hard thing, which is the guy has an amazing year and you really did sell high. And I think value-wise, I think you can make a pretty decent argument that Jacobs and Mixon are pretty close, or at least close enough. I could even see, a universe where Josh Jacobs outproduces Joe Mixon next year, either because he gets hurt or, as you said, there's a lot more mouths to feed and he just doesn't get the production. Maybe not. But adding Rashad Bateman on there, who really could take a step up and could potentially be a wide receiver, high wide receiver 2, or, there's even a possibility he could be a wide receiver 1 if Lamar Jackson stays healthy and some other things break right. I mean, Hollywood Brown had an amazing year last year, but there's very much like a Deebo Samuel type vibe there where he did really well, but let me see you do it again. And if he doesn't, that gives more room for him to step in there. So worst case scenario, I think, it's a break even for you. And that's if Mixon reproduces what he did this year again next year. If not, I think it's a great move for you. You got 2 really high potential, players for one who could be on the downslope. So credit to you. Really, really well done.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
I think the idea is, like, is Mixon ever going to be the RB? I think he finishes the RB3 in 2021.
I think so, yeah.
I don't know if he's ever going to have that kind of finish again. Now, I don't think he's being drafted as the RB3 in Dynasty. Maybe we see it next year in redraft where he's a mid-first round pick. But Dynasty-wise, like, he's still being viewed as more of a back-end RB1 more than a front-end RB1. So I don't think the value is that off. But it's funny because Josh Jacobs is, he's been has it been 3 straight years as a top 12 running back?
Yeah,
I think certainly as a top 15,
very
he's
close.
been 3 straight years. And
what more does he have to do?
well, think he's close. He's valued closer to like RB20 at least entering last year. I think catching 58 passes. I think he was 5th among running backs in receptions last year. So I think finally seeing that is good. Now maybe new offense, new head coach. Maybe don't throw to him as much, but like the outcome where Josh Jacobs outscores Joe Mixon next year isn't unrealistic. It's maybe not likely, but it's also not a 0% chance. And even if they're close, I don't think the difference is enough for Rashad Bateman. Like I think even we're talking about like rankings. I believe if I remember my rankings correctly, they're separated by 2 spots. I have Joe Mixon ranked 2 spots ahead of Josh Jacobs, and like 2 spots to me isn't enough. And it's the same tier. That's not enough for a young wide receiver like Rashad Bateman. Really, a threshold guy, probably a top 36 wide receiver in value at the end, and that's like if you're at the very low end value, it is certainly probably around wide receiver 30. I know we were talking off camera before, Devin, and he's maybe the 3rd option on the team, maybe he's the 2nd option, maybe he is the number 1 wide receiver behind only Mark Andrews on that team. So I think that still exists as well. So I think it's a good trade. I think Mixon might be a good smart sell now. Again, if anyone's paying close to RB3, top 5 RB price, I doubt it. But if they are, then it's a smash sell. But even something like that, where you're pivoting down and still getting likely a top 12 running back and a player that you maybe put in your starting lineup certain weeks, I think that's great. That's the type of threshold tier down you want to do in Dynasty.
Well, good. That makes me feel a little better.
I have a trade as well, and we'll see, because I've been just watching some podcast live streams on YouTube and just posing the question, seeing what people thought, and some responses were, "Oh my god, that's amazing, great way to get out from that guy," and others are, "I think you sold too low." I guess Jay is apparently enjoying the show, so thank you, Jay, for the support. Thanks, and the shout out. Appreciate that. But yeah, hopefully you enjoy this trade. So just I guess start with the settings. It's a 12 team 2 QB tight end 2 tight end premium league. Start 13 overall. No tight ends in this trade, so Doc already doesn't like it.
I mean, Kyle, you have a knack for finding these leagues where it's like I need a master's degree in astrophysics to figure out the scoring settings. But I'll let you continue. You and Hamid used to rap about these things and used to blow my mind. But I'm with you so far.
Yeah. So I think the main takeaway: 12 teams, start 13. So deep starting lineups. I don't think any other league I'm in where you have to start 13 players every week. So knowing that, it was the only Dynasty league where I still had Calvin Ridley. And I guess that was news that we haven't talked about here, but he is suspended for the entirety of the 2022 season for gambling on football games, and maybe reinstated next year, but not 100% certainty that'll happen. But at the very least, a full year suspension. And so my thinking was last share of Ridley may as well get out now. And I wasn't necessarily, as the news hit, like, okay, I have to sell. But it's funny how, last year, obviously I should have sold him before the 2021 season. He was viewed as like maybe some people even viewed him as a top 5 Dynasty wide receiver. Like I missed the boat on selling. I should have sold then. But because I didn't, then he, stepped away from the game for his mental health. And it seems like that uncertainty, like people just stayed away. No one wanted to buy him. As soon as the suspension's announced, and okay, we know he's not playing for this year, but there's certainty. I got 2 offers in my inbox. So It's just it's funny how it's funny. To me, there isn't any more certainty of his NFL future at all. But somehow, because there's been a suspension placed on it and there's like a definitive kind of timetable, at least of like a minimum, people seem to think like, okay, we think he'll come back then. If they were, I guess the prevailing thought is if he wasn't ever going to play again, they would just ban him from the league altogether and he'd be done with, right? So it seems like as soon as the suspension hit, people thought buy low. So 2 offers. One basically pivot down. Well, one was a pivot down, one was a pivot up, actually. Strange. One option was a pivot down from Ridley to Gabe Davis. The other one, though, I would have had to pivot up from Ridley to Kenny Golladay. So clearly I took the Gabe Davis, because I'll be honest, I'm not sure that I value Kenny Golladay more than I value Gabe Davis. So the trade of getting, it wasn't much. So what I ended up getting was Gabe Davis and Russell Gage straight up for Calvin Ridley. Didn't have to give up anything else, knowing it's start 13. I think the original offer was just Gabe Davis for Ridley straight up, and I thought, can I just get something out of it, like a late pick swap? And I think they countered back with Russell Gage. And I thought, you know what? Yeah, I'll just take this. The other offer was Ridley in the 104 for Golladay in the 106, which is, moving down 2 spots, not bad, but it's the idea of I don't want to be the one tearing up, and not for Kenny Golladay. So yeah, so Gabe Davis and Russell Gage for Calvin Ridley. That's what I got.
Go ahead, Doc. He already knows kind of my opinion on it, so I'll let you take the reins here.
Yeah, I mean, I like that very much. I think maybe the most interesting thing is a testament to the times we live in, right? It's like Calvin Ridley is out indefinitely because of, he's working on his mental health. With people like, I don't understand what to do with this. And then they find out he's suspended for gambling, and people are like, this I can identify with. So then now I'm back in,
Yeah, maybe fantasy footballers, right? Gambling so close.
Yeah, they're like, this I get. Okay, suspended. I can deal with suspensions. All right, let's go. Here are your offers. But I really like that. So I think you did well with that, and both of those guys could end up being, pretty productive pieces, especially for a guy who is going to be out at least for a year and maybe longer. And obviously, with whatever he was dealing with before the suspension, I hope that, he's continuing to work on that. And that's, really important. Something that's kind of been understated for him. And, and I know that's been very polarizing amongst, NFL fans and just people in general. But I like the move a lot. So there you go. 2 trades done. And I think you guys both rocked it. So what a pleasure it is for me to be on here with 2 such sharp fantasy football minds. You guys are doing really well.
Thanks, Doc. Although I know how risk averse you were, so I figured you'd be in favor of that trade on my side, to be honest. But nice to hear that. Nice to hear the thoughts.
I just like it from a production standpoint. It's like you're trading away. Yeah, there's potential, but you're going to have production this year, and one of those guys could, or both, could really ascend in the situations that they're in, and this could end up being a huge win for you, even if Calvin Ridley does come back and do Calvin Ridley things a year from now. You still could come out of this smelling like a rose. So, I like it a lot.
If Russell Gage just falls flat on his face and just can't connect with Tom Brady, as long as Gabe Davis does well with Josh Allen, and I think he probably will. I mean, right now he's kind of escaped free agency pretty well. Maybe in the draft they get someone, but I mean, the way I see it, he's going to be one of the top 2 or 3 wide receivers on that team. And yeah, the tight ends are good there, but as of right now, I think he's the number 2 target on that team. So
we've already seen the ceiling. We see what he's capable of doing. So, the upside.
I actually think it's funny. A lot of people are saying, okay, coming off the 4 touchdown game, he'd be a big sell this offseason. I actually think it's the opposite, because so many people are saying sell, sell, sell. I think this is a great time to buy, because no one's valuing him as the fact that he just scored 4 touchdowns in a playoff game, and no one else has ever done that in NFL history. Like, he's not really being valued at that, right? Like, everyone was smart enough to know that, you don't sell off, like, you don't buy at that hype, expecting that to kind of happen every game, right? So dynasty managers are smart enough that his value didn't skyrocket. So, and people were almost expecting his value to skyrocket. It seems like Jay really likes the argument too. And because that expectation was there, people thought, okay, you have to sell at this price. But I don't know if the price ever really went up where people had to sell. So I think he's actually a buy this offseason because of that.
Great. And it didn't hurt today too that Beasley got released. So now he truly is the number 2 on there as it stands right now. But their head coach, John McDermott, was just glowing about him even before that breakout game. So I think they are leaning towards giving him a chance. I mean, I think he's going to be 23 years old. I mean, I would keep him. I don't think there's any reason to move off of him. It's funny, when that game happened, every single dynasty league I'm in, Gabe Davis is on the block. I mean, within like a minute of that game ending, every single one. So
yeah,
you sell when something will never replicate. He may never catch 4 touchdowns in a game ever in his career again. And right, but again, like, no one was buying at that. Everyone was smart enough to know he's never going to score 4 touchdowns in a game again, right? So maybe you found the sucker to buy, and like sold at like No, he's a top 15 dynasty wide receiver. If you get sold at that price, great. But I don't think anyone was buying at that. And yeah, I agree with Jay again. Just it looked like he had flashed at the end of 2019, or sorry, at the end of 2020, and then they bring in Emmanuel Sanders. But Sanders looks like he's gone. Beasley gone, right? And to me, you need now 2 wide receivers to replace him for where he's not producing, not just one guy, right? And it's not just now you need the slot receiver. And you need the other perimeter receiver, and then he's suddenly no longer on the field. But I think so. Even if they draft a wide receiver in the first round, it's going to be Gabe Davis going to be part of that top 3, and that's the real concentration there. Not so much the tight ends, not so much the running backs. It's those 3 wide receivers that Josh Allen loves to throw to. So as long as he's one of those top 3 receivers on the team, I think he should be. I think I've got him wide receiver 28, 27, 29, somewhere in there, in the top 30, maybe not quite top 25, not the wide receiver 2 range, but comfortably in the high end wide receiver 3 range, I think is, and I get the sense that's higher than consensus. So I'm cool with that price at that point.
Agreed.
Love it.
But yeah, so I think there are some big free agents that we didn't quite get to. So maybe that's something we go through in the next episode. I know Devin just kind of peek behind the curtain. We're talking doing a mock draft potentially as well on one of these shows. Rookie mock draft. Rookie season's coming up too. The free agency frenzy is here. So I think 2 episodes before the NFL draft. So at least one of those will be dedicated entirely to rookies. Maybe both. Maybe we split some free agents. I don't know. We haven't really decided what our next episode is going to be like, but we will be back in 2 weeks. So that'll be April. Where's my calendar? No, March 31st, actually. The last day of March. My mistake. Almost April. But yeah, so March 31st, we'll be back here. Potentially having our co-host Brian back, but appreciate former co-host and guest on this episode here, Dr. James Ferretti. Thanks, Doc. Again, on Twitter at TFSDoc. Also, buy the book, Injuries Suck. Your fantasy team doesn't have to, and this book definitely doesn't suck. So definitely suggest everyone get this. I know Jeff has plugged it a few times on the Armchair Show as well. So appreciate everything you do, Doc.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's all about how do you manage risk and learning more about injuries, as we talked about today. And I think for everybody out there, checking out that book is a really good way to get a leg up on your dynasty startups and all these trades that are happening. And how do you evaluate these guys? I really lay it out for you the best that I can. I want to turn you into the best injury analyst So there's a link for the book on my Twitter page at TFSDoc. Give me a follow, shoot me a DM. They're always open, always answering questions for everybody. And I really appreciate you guys having me back here. It's nice to be back home, even just for a little while. And we had a lot of fun here on the Dynasty Gambit last year, and it's fun to come back and recreate a little bit of that and make some new friends, Devin. So it was really a pleasure.
Yeah, definitely.
To meet you, and Kyle, always fun to work with you. So thanks again, guys.
Yeah, of course. I think Doc, actually, we've got a PLP coming up, a personal league podcast, and we've talked about them before. I know that the special February pricing is not there, but you can still purchase a personal league podcast for your league. Check all the details out goingfor2.com. Even though it's not fantasy football season, there's still tons of great DFS content for various sports on goingfor2.com right now. So check that out, and all the great shows on the Going for Two Live network. I guess tomorrow, Friday, the Hot Route with the King of Spice, I believe. So that'll be
nice.
Coming there. And then I have press coverage on Monday with Linda G. Kicking it, talking kickers, talking Oklahoma State, talking all sorts of fantasy fun. So that'll be Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Speak on it speak on it's moving to every second Tuesday now. So you may have a new show next Tuesday, but of course, every Wednesday, the Armchair Fantasy Show. So Jeff Lambert and Ryan Searfoss and their flagship show. Always great to hear that. And again, they'll probably plug the book again. So again, injuries suck, but the book definitely doesn't.
Never an off season here at Going for Two. We just keep the content coming for everybody. So hope you guys enjoyed. It was really a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, non-point scoring season, no off season, because we're always
off season.
Fantasy advice is always on. But again, thanks for coming on to the show, Doc. And Devin, as always, great to have you on and hear your dynasty thoughts.
Yeah, great show, guys. Really appreciate it. It was a good talk.
I know Jay said great show, guys. So appreciate that. Appreciate everyone watching, listening. Jay, Thomas, the B League was even in here. The disparaging Packers comments aside, I always love the support from our friends. But yes, on behalf of Doc, on behalf of Devin, I'm Kyle Senra, and this was